He hadn't spoken to his father in over a decade until the old man passed away. But when the will was read aloud, every single person in the room gasped. Daniel was always a man of ambition. A rising corporate star, he built his empire brick by brick, chasing wealth and power with a laser-sharp focus. Somewhere along the way, he stopped returning his father's calls. The man who once stayed up nights nursing Daniel through fevers, who worked double shifts to pay for his education, became just an old voice message he never played. Daniel convinced himself that his father was fine in the countryside, retired, harmless, and out of the way. He even stopped visiting on birthdays. There was always an excuse. A board meeting. A client dinner. A deadline. He didn't realize that with every year, his father's silence was turning into something deeper than distance. It was pain. The only time Daniel returned to his hometown in 10 years was for the funeral. His father had died quietly in the small house he never left, surrounded by neighbors who remembered the man Daniel had long forgotten. At the church, Daniel wore his black suit like armor, but inside, he felt nothing. Not sadness. Not guilt. Just emptiness. He stood through the ceremony like it was a formality. He thought he had made peace with his choices. But then came the reading of the will. It was in a quiet room above the funeral parlor, just Daniel and the lawyer, Mr. Whitmore, a man with silver hair and sympathetic eyes. As the document was opened, Daniel expected the usual: a few sentimental items, perhaps the house, maybe some old books. But then Mr. Whitmore began to read. "To my son Daniel, who has forgotten me, I leave what I hope will remind him of who he used to be." The words hit him harder than he expected. But it wasn't just words. Inside a thick envelope was an old showbox. Daniel opened it to find childhood drawings, his first handwriting book, and a worn-out photo of them fishing by the lake. Then, something heavier, a key and a letter. The letter wasn't long, but every sentence felt like a punch. His father wrote about the day Daniel was born, how proud he was when Daniel walked for the first time, and how every success Daniel had was a victory he celebrated alone. He wrote about how each ignored birthday felt like being erased. But the final line was the one Daniel would never forget: "The greatest wealth I ever had was being your father, even when I knew I had lost you." Daniel sat there, stunned. He could barely breathe. Mr. Whitmore placed a hand on his shoulder and handed him another envelope, a bank statement and a deed. To his disbelief, his father had saved nearly $1 million and had bought a property in Daniel's name. The man who Daniel assumed had nothing had left him more than money. He left him a message. A mirror to his past. A lesson in what truly mattered. Daniel returned to the house that night. It was cold, filled with silence and echoes of years he had missed. He walked through every room like a stranger in a museum of his own life. In the study, he found old letters he had sent from college, each one preserved like treasure. He broke down on the couch where his father used to read. For the first time in years, Daniel cried, not because of loss, but because of regret. The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He didn't return to his penthouse. Instead, he stayed in that small town for a while. He fixed the broken fence, replanted the garden, and sat at the local diner his father once loved. People who knew his dad came up and told stories of kindness, of generosity, of a man who gave more than he ever had. Daniel listened. And with every story, he began to understand the depth of the man he had overlooked. Months later, Daniel started a foundation in his father's name, a home for abandoned elders, those forgotten by their families. He told the media it was in honor of his greatest teacher. But deep down, he knew it was an apology. Not just to his father, but to himself for letting the world convince him that success was louder than love. Now, whenever someone asks Daniel about his greatest turning point, he doesn't talk about stocks or deals. He talks about a will, a letter, and a father who waited a lifetime to be heard.